A narrative of the captivity and restoration of Miss Mary Rowlandson. On the 10th of February, 1675, came the Indians with great numbers upon Lancaster. Their first coming was about sunrising. Hearing the noise of some guns, we looked out. Several houses were burning, and the smoke ascending to heaven. There were 5 persons taken in one house, the father and the mother and a sucking child. They knocked on the head. The other 2 they took and carried alive. There were 2 others, who being out of their garrison upon some occasion were set upon. One was knocked on the head, the other escaped. Another there was who was running along, was shot and wounded, and fell down. He begged of them his life, promising them money, as they told me, but they would not hearken to him, but knocked him in the head, and stripped him naked, and split open his bowels. Another, seeing many of the Indians about his barn, ventured and went out, but was quickly shot down. There were 3 others belonging to the same garrison who were killed. The Indians, getting up upon the roof of the barn, had advantage to shoot down upon them from over their fortification. Thus these murderous wretches went on, burning and destroying before them. At length they came and beset our own house, and quickly it was the dolefullest day that ever mine eyes saw. The house stood upon the edge of a hill. Some of the Indians got behind the hill, others into the barn, and others behind anything that could shelter them. From all which places they shot against the house, so that the bullets seemed to fly like hail, and quickly they wounded one man among us, then another, and then a third. About 2 hours, according to my observation in that amazing time, they had been about the house before they prevailed to fire it, which they did with flax and hemp, which they brought out of the barn, and there being no defense about the house, only 2 flankers at 2 opposite corners, and one of them not finished. They fired it once, and ventured out, and quenched it, but they quickly fired it again, and that took. Now is the dreadful hour come that I have often heard of, in time of war, as it was the case of others. But now mine eyes see it. Some in our house were fighting for their lives, others wallowing in their blood, the house on fire over our heads, and the bloody heathen ready to knock us on the head if we stirred out. Now might we hear mothers and children crying out for themselves, and one another, Lord, what shall we do? Then I took my children, and one of my sisters hers, to go forth and leave the house. But as soon as we came to the door and appeared, the Indians shot so thick that the bullets rattled against the house, as if one had taken a handful of stones, and threw them, so that we were fain to give back. We had 6 stout dogs belonging to our garrison, but none of them would stir, though another time, if any Indian had come to the door, they were ready to fly upon him and tear him down. The Lord hereby would make us the more acknowledge his hand, and to see that our help is always in him. But out we must go, the fire increasing, and coming along behind us, roaring, and the Indians gaping before us with their guns, spears, and hatchets to devour us. No sooner were we out of the house, but my brother-in-law, being before wounded in defending the house or near the throat, fell down dead, whereat the Indians scornfully shouted and hallowed, and were presently upon him, stripping off his clothes. The bullets flying thick, one went through my side, and the same, as would seem, through the bowels and hand of the dear child in my arms. One of my elder sister's children, named William, had then his leg broken, which the Indians perceiving, they knocked him on his head. Thus were we butchered by those merciless heathen, standing amazed, with the blood running down to our heels, my eldest sister yet being in the house, and seeing those woeful sights, the infidels hauling the mothers one way, and children another, and some wallowing in their blood, and her elder son telling her that her son William was dead, and myself was wounded, she said, And Lord, let me die with them, which was no sooner said, but she was struck with a bullet, and fell down dead over the threshold. I hope she is reaping the fruit of her good labors, being faithful in the service of God in her place. In her younger years she lay under much trouble upon spiritual accounts, till it pleased God to make that precious scripture take hold of her heart. Quote, And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee. End quote. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. More than 20 years after, I have heard her tell how sweet and comfortable that place was to her. But to return, the Indians laid hold of us, pulling me one way and the children another, and said, Come, go along with us. I told them that they would kill me. They answered, if I were willing to go along with them, they would not hurt me. Oh, the doleful sight that was now to behold at this house! Come, behold the works of the Lord, what desolation he has made in the earth. Of 37 persons who were in this one house, none escaped either present death or bitter captivity, save one who might say that he, quote, and I only am escaped alone to tell the news, end quote. Job chapter 1, verse 15. There were already 12 killed, some shot, some stabbed with their spears, some knocked down with their hatchets. When we are in prosperity, oh, the little that we think of such dreadful sights, but to see our dear friends, and to see our dear friends and relations lie bleeding out their heart blood upon the ground. There was one who was chopped into the head with a hatchet and stripped naked, and yet was crawling up and down. It is a solemn sight to see so many Christians lying in their blood, some here and some there, like a company of sheep torn by wolves, all of them stripped naked by a company of hellhounds, roaring, singing, ranting, and insulting, as if they would have torn their very hearts out. Yet the Lord by his almighty power preserved a number of us from death, for there are 24 of us taken alive and carried captive. I had often before this said that if the Indians should come, I should choose rather to be killed by them than taken alive, but when it came to the trial my mind changed. Their glittering weapons so daunted my spirit that I had rather to go along with those, as I may say, ravenous beasts, than that moment to the end of my days, and that I may the better declare what happened to me during that grievous captivity, I shall particularly speak of the several removes we had up and down in the wilderness. The first remove. Now away we must go with those barbarous creatures, with our bodies wounded and bleeding, and our hearts no less than our bodies. About a mile we went that night, up upon a hill, within sight of the town, where they intended to lodge. There was hard by a vacant house, deserted by the English before, for fear of the Indians. I asked them whether I might not lodge in the house that night, to which they answered, What? Will you love Englishmen still? This was the dolefulest night that ever my eyes saw. Oh, the roaring and the singing and the dancing and the yelling of those black creatures in the night, which made the place a lively resemblance of hell. And as miserable was the waste that was there, made of horses, cattle, sheep, swine, calves, lambs, roasting pigs, and fowl, for which they had plundered in the town, some roasting, some lying and burning, some boiling to feed our merciless enemies, who were joyful enough, though we were disconsolate. To add to the dolefulness of that former day and the dismalness of the present night, my thoughts ran upon my losses and sad bereaved condition. All was gone, my husband gone, or at least separated from me, he being in the bay, and to add to my grief, the Indians told me that they would kill him as he came homeward. My children gone, my relations and friends gone, our house and home and all our comforts, within door and without, all was gone except my life. And I knew not but the next moment that it might go too. There remained nothing to me but one poor wounded babe, and it seemed at present worse than death it was in such pitiful condition, bespeaking compassion, and I had no refreshing for it, nor suitable things to revive it. Little do many think what is the savageness and the brutishness of this barbarous enemy. Ay, even those that seem to profess more than others among them, when the English have fallen into their hands. Thus the 7 that were killed at Lancaster in the summer before upon a Sabbath day, and the one that was afterward killed upon a weekday, were slain and mangled in a barbarous manner by One-Eyed John and Marlborough's praying Indians, which Captain Mosley brought to Boston, as the Indians told me. The second remove. But now, the next morning, I must turn my back upon the town, and travel with them to the vast and desolate wilderness. I knew not whither. It was not my tongue or pen that can express the sorrows of my heart and bitterness of my spirit that I had at this departure. But God was with me in a wonderful manner, carrying me along and bearing up my spirit, that it did not quite fail. One of the Indians carried my poor wounded babe upon a horse. It went moaning all along, I shall die, I shall die. I went on foot after it, with sorrow that cannot be expressed. At length I took it off the horse and carried it in my arms until my strength failed, and I fell down with it. Then they set me upon a horse with my wounded child in my lap, and there being no furniture upon the horse's back, as we were going down a steep hill, we both fell over the horse's head, at which they, like inhumane creatures, laughed and rejoiced to see it, though I thought we should have there ended our days, as overcome with so many difficulties. But the Lord renewed my strength still, and carried me along, that I might see more of his power, yea, so much that I could never have thought of. I had not experienced it. After this it quickly began to snow, and when night came on, they stopped. And now down I must sit in the snow by a little fire and a few boughs behind me, with my sick child in my lap, and calling much for water, being now, through the wound, fallen into a violent fever. My own wound also growing so stiff that I could scarce sit down or rise up, yet so it must be, that I must sit all this cold winter night upon the cold snowy ground, with my sick child in my arms, looking that every hour would be the last of this life, and having no Christian friend near me, either to comfort or help me. Oh, I may see the wonderful power of God, that my spirit did not utterly sink under my affliction. Still the Lord upheld me with his gracious and merciful spirit, and we were both alive to see the light of the next morning. The third remove. The morning being come, they prepared to go on their way. One of the Indians got up upon a horse, and they set me up behind him, with my poor sick babe in my lap. A very wearisome and tedious day I had of it, what with my own wound, and my child's being so exceedingly sick, and in a lamentable condition with her wound. It may be easily judged what a poor feeble condition we are in, there being not the least crumb of refreshing that came within either of our mouths from Wednesday night to Sunday night, except only a little cold water. This day in the afternoon, about an hour by the sun, we came to the place where they intended, viz., an Indian woman called Wenimesed, north of Kabog, where we were come. Oh, the number of pagans, now merciless enemies, that there came about me, that I may say, as David, I had fainted unless I had believed, etc., Psalm chapter 27, verse 13. The next day was the Sabbath. I then remembered how careless I had been of God's holy time, how many Sabbaths I had lost and misspent, and how evilly I had walked in God's sight, which now lay so close unto my spirit, that it was easy for me to see how righteous it was with God to cut off the thread of my life and cast me out of his presence forever. Yet the Lord still showed mercy to me and upheld me. And as he wounded me with his one hand, so he healed me with the other. This day there came to me one Robert Pepper, a man belonging to Roxbury, who had taken in Captain Beers's fight, and had been now a considerable time with the Indians, and up with them almost as far as Albany to see King Philip, as he told me, and was now very lately come into these parts. Hearing, I say, that I was in this Indian town, he obtained leave to come and see me. He told me he himself was wounded in the leg at Captain Beers's fight, and was not able some time to go, but as they carried him, and as he took oaken leaves to lay to his wound, and through the blessing of God, he was able to travel again. Then I took oaken leaves and laid to my side, and with the blessing of God it cured me also. Yet before the cure was wrought, I may say, as it is in Psalm chapter 38, verses 5 and 6, my wounds stink and are corrupt. I am troubled. I am bowed down greatly. Go mourning all the day long. I sat much alone with a poor wounded country child in my lap, which moaned night and day, having nothing to revive the body or cheer the spirits of her. But instead of that, sometimes one Indian would come and tell me 1 hour that, quote, your master will knock your child in the head, end quote, and then a second, and then a third, your master will quickly knock your child in the head. This was the comfort I had from them. Miserable comforters are ye all, as he said. Thus 9 days I sat upon my knees, with my babe in my lap, till my flesh was raw again. My child being even ready to depart this sorrowful world, they bade me carry it out to another wigwam.